Hi everyone. I'm Julian Ongpin, if you don't know me. I run a little gallery downstairs, which I've done so for 3 or 4 years. It's called Julian Ongpin Young Artists. And it doesn't deal just with like biologically young artists. My idea of what young and youth is primarily about the youthful execution of things, honesty of application, and lots of things like that. So when I came across Ramon and this idea of First World Manila, and his other brands as well, art and finance and whatnot, it's very, like, I find it very courageous. I find it very in line with the things that I try to do and the things that I try to bring here in terms of art, and I find it very direct. And I think that that's very important because we live in a world that can be very indirect and very with a lot of compromise. And what he's trying to do is say there's a problem, and it can be solved tangibly, and it can be contributed. We can contribute to a solution, like all of us. So I was very excited about his artwork and everything, his brand, and launching it, helping him launch it. And then yesterday I got to hear this talk, and I'd never actually heard. Yeah, I'd seen a few of the videos and stuff, such as Madrid versus a sculptor, and the differences and similarities. But I'd never actually heard the talk, and it was really good. So pressure is on, my friend. Okay, so that's, without further ado, it's Ramon Cuenco.
Thank you everybody for your applause, and thank you for taking the time today in the middle of the week. In the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, of course a very busy week. It really means a lot to me to show your support. The big event is actually in October, in the middle of October, where I actually working with Julian to launch an art exhibit. It's co-branded First World Manila and Poeta Gallery. That's on October 15th on Saturday, so there's a bigger crowd for that, but I'm really excited and happy that everyone here was able to make it on a Wednesday, so thank you so much. You're the real troopers. Before I start, I'd like to just do some housekeeping duties. The first is that this talk is going to be, it's being recorded. Am I in the screen? Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's going to be posted on social media, taking advantage of today's technology, so Facebook and YouTube. And there's going to be a podcast version available. And I'll give you the information on my website and my social media pages afterwards. But actually part of the script was that I was going to say, please don't mind if like your heads show up in the video, like the back of your heads, but the camera's over there, so none of you will actually be in the video, so it's okay, so you'll be anonymous. So yeah, that's it. Without further ado, I will start my formal presentation. Okay. How many people here have heard of First World Manila? Okay, a handful of people, right? That's fine. It's a very young brand, it's very new, and I'm growing it organically. The next question is, raise your hand if you like poverty, and homelessness and pollution and stuff like that. Anyone like that? Yeah, see, he didn't like that either. Yeah, so no one does. So in that sense, I think you will like what I'm about to talk about. Okay, just a bit about who I am. My name is Ramon Rodrigo Cuenca, CFA. I am a former equity research analyst from Bank of Singapore, which is a private bank in Singapore. I have a background in finance and business, and also as an undergraduate at the University of Chicago, I studied international political economy. That's basically a mix of political science and economics. And one of the things I studied was economic development. So really a mixed bag of things I'm interested in, but they're all kind of related. And I also like to draw and paint. So most of the artwork you see here is my artwork. As Julian mentioned, we are doing together to sort of use art to help bridge this gap between theory and reality. But I'll get into that in a bit. So what happened was a few years ago I decided to follow my passions and I left the corporate world. What I wanted to do, my starting point was that I wanted to see if I can get paid for doing everything I love, which is a bunch of things. And what came from that was two brands. Art and Finance is one brand, and First World Manila is the other. And I'll explain this. I'll explain what these two are in a second. Basically, both of these two brands are using art because I like to draw and paint, and a sort of analysis and like my understanding of the financial and political situation in the world to make it interesting to a broader public. And that is basically the mission of these two brands. Art and Finance is an international brand, and First World Manila is a local Philippine-specific brand. So these are two pieces of art from both brands respectively. This is international, this is about Hong Kong. This is for Art and Finance, and this is First World Manila. So this is artwork I've done. I'll explain it to you in a second. But you can see the Chinese characters and get the Alibaba here. So these are two pieces of art that I've done that kind of represent both of my brands. So again, these are brands that are using art and digital media to get people interested in things that most of us, unfortunately, weren't educated in. Even if we're educated, we're not really knowledgeable about in what I think is a decent capacity. So the idea is to really get people interested in what I call money literacy. And does anyone have any ideas what I mean when I say money literacy? Anyone? Okay, yeah, passive income, right? So that's one component. So I chose the name money literacy rather than financial literacy because when I tell people I want to spread financial literacy, the most immediate thing people think about is personal finance. Which is good, but there's a lot of that available on the internet and wherever and for free. It's not. I don't think it's a problem that needs solving. What I do think needs solving in this world is understanding not just personal finance, but also the finance sector in general, how businesses work, how different businesses work, and also the global and local economy. And that's really important because at the end of the day, most of us live in democracies and we vote. And when you vote for people, you vote for their party's political and economic policies. For me, my sense is that social issues they're sort of more tangible and easier to grasp than economic issues. So I'm trying to make things like interest rates or long-term planning development and competitive strategy between different countries and trade. I want things like that to be more interesting and engaging to people. So I'm using art, I'm wrapping that sort of message and that education in art and delivering it via digital media. So the idea is to make it interesting for people. Because there are definitely real world effects in what you vote for, not just with obviously the political side and the social side, but also the economic side. Whichever country you're from, since they see it. We have a mixed audience today. So both Art and Finance and First World Manila are what I call aspirational advocacy. So what I'm doing is building a brand, right? But it's also an advocacy. So you have sort of the appeal, the aspirational appeal for a brand, which you'll see in a second, but also sort of the advocacy of really getting people to do things and really take action among issues that I feel are important to people here in the Philippines and in the rest of the world. Okay. So how does this all apply to? Let me just show you something first. So this is some of the art that I've done, and I also have a webcomic that talks about the economy and business. So, anyways, I'll skip over that for now and get back to that later. How does this translate to Manila? The idea with First World Manila is that within that sort of broader spectrum of money literacy, I think what's most pertinent right now, the most immediate thing that has to be solved here in the Philippines is economic development, right? So within that sort of cloud of money literacy, the one issue I want to focus on is economic development for the Philippines and make that an interesting, like a social cause for people. It's something that I think everyone should know about. because normally when you read the news, you hear about corruption this, corruption that, or politics this, but I think what's missing for a lot of people is sort of a big picture view on things as well, which I'll get to in a second. And again, I want to wrap this up with the idea of aspiration, right? So this is an example. This is a painting I did of Escolta, reimagining it kind of as a richer place. There's a nice central plaza. This is the Carriedo fountain. I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Carriedo fountain in Escolta, Binondo? Yeah. So you have it's such a beautiful fountain, but it's surrounded by crap. Frankly speaking, it's surrounded by shit. But imagine if that's in the middle of a plaza, and they give the Calesa, you have little like tapas bars, and you have like Art Deco and Filipino style buildings. The idea is to really get people emotionally engaged, and then you sort of sell them on, okay, now that you care about this, what are the long-term policies that have to be enacted or done to get us there? Okay. This is another painting I did, manga style, like Japanese comic style. This is EDSA without any traffic. There's the Pasig River, it's nice and green. Okay. So when I started First World Manila, because I'm from an analyst background, I first thought about, okay, what are the policies? Maybe there are policies that are needed to really fix the Philippines and really get people out of poverty in a significant manner. You kept digging and digging. But, the more I read about it, the more I realized, like it's all there in the news. Like, this is what you need to do. You read any op-ed from Business World or Philstar or Inquirer or whoever, there's no dearth of good ideas of how to fix this country. There's really none. And in fact, there are a lot of bills that have been passed, like, this act and that act. The Philippine Competition Act comes to mind as one of the first ones. It's really all there. But that's not what actually the problem is. Can anyone think of what I think the problem is? Why? I'm sorry?
Budget.
Okay, yeah. That's one branch of it. Yeah, right. Attitude. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's I think what Evan was saying. It is attitude, and I want to tie it into the fact that the problem I find underlying every economic problem in the Philippines is that we're only a nation on paper. So, what I mean by nation is that there should be more of a sense of citizenship. But as we all know, most of us just try to work hard and get out of here. Whether you're poor or middle class or rich, everyone wants to get a job abroad. I mean, for the most part, right? It's hard to stay here and change things. And you can go into our history, where all these different ethno-linguistic groups. There was no Philippines before the Spanish came over. There's no sense of a common identity, or at least not enough to make change. You think of you can compare us, maybe contrast this to maybe the most. I think maybe we're on one end of the spectrum, right? Maybe like a country like Japan is on the other end of the spectrum. So that's sort of one comparison and contrast you can think about. Okay, so it's not the reason why this is important is because you have to aspire to. If you're a nation, you have to aspire to something above and beyond your own self-interest, right? Otherwise, why not just go abroad and find a job abroad and send money back to your family, right? I mean, why stay here, right? If you have the chance, why not leave? And this is the problem here, is that when you want to get people to act beyond the interests of their own self-interest or the interests of their family or their friends, right? You have to have them aspire to something above and beyond that, so we can avoid things like this. Right? See, we could be something like this, but right now we're like this. The reason this is important is because all these policies, there are all these laws that have been passed, all these things that everyone knows what has to be done, but there's a gap between theory and practice, between ideas and execution, right? I mean, one major example I think everyone can identify with is the infrastructure problem here. Every administration comes in, there's supposed to be some massive infrastructure program. Although there has a lot that has been done, right? To be fair, things have been done, but I'll get to it later. Is it not being done? Which I'll get to in a bit later. So it's not that there aren't people who care, because there are definitely people who care and want to make change. But the question is it enough to really move the needle secularly? All right. Okay, and so this is the big problem. And my proposal is that we can use art and digital media to help solve this problem. Seriously. Okay. I'm 100% serious about this. So to understand why, I want to start with something that's obvious again to people who live abroad. If you live in a rich country, you'll know that corruption isn't like a Filipino-specific thing. There is corruption and political scandals in developed countries too. So even countries like the Philippines, but this is Seoul, South Korea, for example. I mean, South Korea has recently been riven by political scandals, and yet the average standard of living is way better than here in the Philippines. Again, why is that? Why is it that despite these rich countries, whether it's in East Asia or Western Europe or the US or Australia, Canada, why is it that despite their own problems, like first world problems, I guess, why is it that they're able to still get things done? Why can they still enjoy things like this? Whereas for most of us, for the average Filipino, this is what life is. And again, it's not for lack of trying. I like to point out that there are people here, and we always, as Filipinos, and even those who live here, we're always happy when other Filipinos succeed. Like recently, I read this news about this young lady, Marjeline Vidal, who was a daughter of a street vendor here who won a gold medal in the Asian Games recently for skateboarding. And a lot of people, I posted this on Facebook and saw a lot of people click on it and like it. So it's not like we're there, or it's not like there isn't it's not like the situation is completely hopeless. There are people who care and who are, there is some sense of national identity. But again, is it enough? The reason why this is important, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, is that even though things are being done, my whole thing about this is that it's kind of like one step forward and then one step back. You know what I mean? Like one step forward, one step back. We're still in the same place. I'm going to kind of be very visual about this now. What we want to avoid is what economists call the middle income trap, and that's basically where countries developed from being dirt poor to some level where there's some middle class and some educated class here, but not really going past that. So the ADB even once mentioned the Philippines, for example, if you look at that top there. The Philippines has kind of been middle income for the past 50 years. I guess they put Malaysia and Thailand there, but I would kind of rank them up with the Philippines. That's just me personally. There's some talk about whether we can reach higher middle income status, but I don't see it happening right now for a lot of reasons, which I won't get to. You can ask me about it personally afterwards, after this talk. So if we're going one step forward, one step backward, and in Asia, this is a race to who develops the most and who has the most sizable middle class. If we're kind of here, a few steps forward, maybe a step back or so, maybe a few steps forward, right? And then we have BPOs and OW. You have countries Japan's here at the end, they have industrial policy, they built the whole middle class, they're kind of here, Then later on, you kind of have Singapore, South Korea, right? Kind of jogging over there. They have, again, long-term planning and policy that they have, right? Then you have things, you even have Vietnam, kind of doing the same thing, right? They have policies that work to really build a stronger middle class, which a lot of it is based on industrial policy. So that's something we need to think about. Right now, we're just built to export labor abroad. Okay, I know that there are, let's see, yeah, well, I'll get this in a second. I know that there are some good things going on in this economy. There has been a sizable middle class built here, particularly Well, first there's OFWs, of course, but we also have BPO. But again, and maybe even a real estate bubble now. But I don't know how long BPO is going to last as an industry. First of all, I'm not sure how many people can really employ, like as compared to like outsourcing factories here. Second is we have to watch out for AI, because AI could always replace our BPO workers. Especially now. Someone brought up to me the fact that I'm sure many people with the news with Google and stuff, but I think maybe last year they debuted like software where you can literally speak, and then the software will translate it into another language, right? So what's to stop some of these these global firms from taking labor from us, an even poorer country like somewhere in Africa, for example, and they don't need to speak English anymore. Our whole advantage right now is you can speak English, but once that translation tool hits scale, then we have a problem. That's just one example. And I know no one can really predict how AI will affect and robotics will affect people's jobs. It's a worldwide problem. We don't really know. But I think all economies, including the Philippines, should have a long-term plan for it, even just to diversify industry instead of just relying on BPO. So this is an example, by the way, of what I mean by money literacy. Thinking about these bigger problems. Even if you're just reading the news, you're thinking about, okay, how does this, reading about BPO, how does this, what can we do? What's the larger picture here? What's the problem? Okay. Again, I talked about how to do this, we really have to sit down and really think about long-term planning. So I mentioned our Asian neighbors who have had long-term planning and industrial policy that have helped them really bring up people. But that's very difficult to do. And a lot of the times, because I think for a lot of them, like China, Japan, Vietnam, what I like to bring up is that they kind of have an advantage over us in the sense that they're not. I mentioned before that there wasn't a Philippines before colonialism, but there was there was a Korean kingdom. There was obviously China, all the dynasties. There was a sense of nationhood within these kingdoms. So even if that's something I've noticed, by the way, with all the developed countries, almost all of them, they're all descended from kingdoms and empires that have been around for hundreds of years. So China's an obvious one, but even in Western Europe, right? You're looking at, it's not like these rich countries became rich overnight. They developed, in my point of view, they developed over hundreds and hundreds of years versus, kingdoms and empires, and they had their whole revolution of reform, and they became democracies, and they had, capitalist democracies were able to have these policies that they can lift people up out of poverty. But there's a sense of nationhood there. There were a lot of philosophers who have talked about all this kind of stuff. I don't want to go into any of these guys in detail, but basically, one thing to think about is that the whole thing is that someone, sometime in history, came over with a huge army that had a lot of, really strong weapons and said, "This is my kingdom," right? And these are the boundaries of my kingdom, and within here, you're going to follow the laws that I create, right? And if you don't, I will punish you with my law enforcement. That's the start of that, right? And from there, you grow and you build these. And that's the way it is. And eventually people are like, man, this king is giving me, providing me with services needed. So the king, for example, say, this is mine. Here's my government bureaucracy. Here's my judicial system. Here's my army. Here are my institutions. So there's something that's built there, originally for a king or an emperor, but eventually because these institutions can provide services to people within that border. So even if these countries evolve past the whole king and emperor thing, the institutions are still there in some way or respect, and they work and they get things done. So these are basically, people have been thinking about this for a long time. I just kind of want to be thinking about these kinds of concepts also. This is called political economy, by the way, which I studied. I want to make this interesting to people. Okay. And the thing is that, here's the thing too, and here's where the art comes in, and I mentioned this before, that the art and media comes in. It's not just coercive forces, pointing a gun at somebody, or pointing a spear or a sword and saying, hey, follow me because you're in my kingdom. It's not just that. people, if you notice, some of these emperors, they have art too. They fund the arts, right? I mean, this is Napoleon on the left, and on the right is Genghis Khan, right? It's not just about forcing people to do things. You have to make them want to do it also. It's kind of like carrot and stick, right? Maybe for their own selfish needs, but they eventually develop something, right? So after a while, you force people to live within this area, and you provide them goods and services. You say, you provide them with infrastructure and some relative safety and standard of living, and say, oh, I am French, or I am Mongolian, like, right? That's what it, because again, it's not just forcing them to change and see something that's kind of beyond them. It's also about making them want to change. So it's like forcing people and making them want to change. Because change is hard. Change is hard. You're asking, it's very hard to make people change on an individual level. So you use art, not just weapons, but you also use art to win people over. And art as distributed through media. You know, I mean, first we had the printing press, right? And now we have the internet. And for me, the internet is one of the biggest game changers in like human culture, I think, in the next generation too. Like, we're just at the start of it. My own biased opinion. Okay. Let's see. Right. Yeah, here's another example. This is Japan. It's interesting because this is kind of like their propaganda when they industrialize in one generation, right? It's interesting because it looks very Japanese, but they've kind of adopted Western clothing and Western attitudes, right? So it's kind of like they're kind of showing this is who we are. Here we can modernize, you know. So it's just another example. And I think that sense is kind of lacking here because the native are so poor. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, and it's really here. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe it's because I'll let the historians and philosophers debate about this, like why there's no stronger sense of nationalism or identity here. But what we have now is that we have people who are just, it's more about finding a way to make money, right? So the way it's developed for us is that we have an economy and education system that some have thought or think are aimed at educating people for export. So OFWs, seafarers, etc., etc. So, I mean, this is a good example. I mean, if you want, you can take a picture of this. Because I suggest you read this article. It's interesting because the author is basically saying that like the education system here is meant for exporting people abroad, but there's no sense of creating or teaching or developing civic mindedness in our city and country. So this is just, and so it's not me who's observing other people as well. So again, it's hard to get people to kind of most of history. You have to force people to change, to aspire to something beyond their own self-interest or their family and friends' self-interest. Okay. And what's interesting about the Philippines too, I'm going to talk about something. I know I've been very airy-fairy, kind of very theoretical right now, but I do want to talk about a bit about Philippine history. Is that I think this sense of just for the self, for the families, if you can even see it in our physical spaces. There are very few parks or public places that are clean and well maintained. There are no real sidewalks. They're just kind of being built. And I know a lot of us, and I know because the Facebook data tells me, I know a lot of us are very hurt about what happened to Old Manila. You know, and I think as Carlos Celdran said, it's the soul of our culture, our national culture. And I know it came to see Manila that way. But even before World War II, way before that, there was already kind of a problem. I would say almost culturally that this is an article I read from Esquire. One historian was talking about what it was like in Intramuros, you know, in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 1800s. At least according to this article, it wasn't the Spanish who just lived in Intramuros; it was also the rich. So it was already a walled city, and everyone else lived outside of nipa huts. And there was already traffic going in and out of the walled city as well. So it's kind of, in some ways, if this person is correct, and it's kind of been there it's been in our culture from the beginning. Think about today, even though Intramuros is gone and it's kind of decrepit, we've moved out. We still have Forbes, Dasma, Green Hills, Alabang, right? Even BGC.
Because BUC is hard to get to.
In a way, it's a little bit of a little well-gated community. So again, like,
It's another forum.
yeah.